Today we're going to look at supported child's pose. Now, as with all the postures in the restorative canon, there are almost endless variations, and my encouragement at the start of each of these videos is going to be explore the practice and the posture yourself. That's the best way to understand it as a student, and also those who are looking to teach this practice to others. It's the best way to understand how you are going to teach it. Because it's such an individual practice, the tradition of yoga, everything that we share, everything that we teach is really on a very individual level, and never more so than in restorative yoga. We're going to try to start with the least amount of equipment possible, and that means it's probably the most accessible variation of the pose, at least equipment-wise, if not anatomically. So here, for our first variation, one bolster, one blanket, one brick, one mat. Let's begin by unraveling our legs, coming towards the back of our mat, taking our bolster on top. Now, as we walk towards the back of the mat, and I would say this is one of the most fundamental parts of this posture, what we want to do is ensure that when we fold our blanket, one, it's thick enough to add some comfort and support to the knees and the tops of the feet, but also that it spans the width of the mat, if not longer. And that's because, if you can see from the position of my legs, we're going to instruct to have the knees to the width of the mat. And if we're kind of at the end of the mat and we've kind of got what it'll kind of do, the knees half on the blanket, half off. Now, if you were staying here for 30 seconds or even a minute, that might not even be noticeable. When we're practicing restorative yoga and we're here for 3 minutes, 5 minutes and beyond, things like that can be very distracting and cause lots of tension within the body and the mind. So let's start, as we mean to go on, create as much support as you feel we can. So for me, with my blanket, this is a twofold to come into this larger rectangular shape. It'll be different for yourself dependent on how big your blanket is. Once that your blanket spans the full width of the mat or beyond, let's just make sure, or try to ensure, as much smoothness over the mat as we can, so that those wrinkles aren't crossing any of the areas where our body's going to be resting onto. Once we feel that we've smoothed out, let's crawl onto the mat. As our knees come to the width of the mat, here you can see that my knee is on the mat, so the firmness of the mat, the cushioning of the blanket, and so too at the back, so my feet feel nice and cushioned. The bolster is going to come in. The bolster comes right into the center of our body, and it's going to draw towards hugging that very midline of the spine. The thighs can rest against the bolster so they can gently draw themselves in for a moment. And then we can take the brick to add more support. The reason being that elevation means that the head has support and we have less stretch of the neck. For many people, and myself included, if I'm to come into this forward folded position, into a child's pose, probably going to find that my head drops lower than my shoulders because I'm a bit broader in the chest. And so I'm going to feel quite a considerable stretch in the neck. By propping up where our head is going to rest, that doesn't happen. Final consideration, and this will be a running theme through child's pose, is the support that we find around the stomach. Some people are going to find that they want more support, and having a bolster or in future a number of bolsters or props resting against the stomach offers that support so they can feel that they are breathing into something. For others, it's going to feel uncomfortable and quite intrusive, and that's something you can only navigate when you've experienced each of these different variations. For this first variation, we will walk forwards. As the body rests down, we very gently and slowly turn the cheek so we can rest the side of the head down onto the bolster and the support of the brick, and then turn the palms skywards, relax the shoulders. In this second variation, we have the addition of a second bolster and a second blanket. Essentially, that's there to add more height. When we add more height, some people will feel more supported. Means there's less of a stretch on the back, less of a stretch on the back of the neck, but also it can feel a little more supportive around the stomach and chest area. We begin setup in much the same way. We take a blanket with us as we move towards the back of our mat. So that means the blanket's placed towards the middle or to the second third of our mat. We unfold it or we fold it to a degree where we are aware it covers the entire span of the mat. Take out any creases that we can find. Slowly come forwards onto the blanket, resting our knees and the tops of our feet down. Then bolster comes in as it had before. The second bolster comes on top. This is where we get the additional height to begin with. Now again, that consideration of the stomach is important. For some, stacking the bolsters one on top of another and then coming forwards feels supportive around the stomach and they can breathe into the bolster. For others, it's going to feel uncomfortable and for some, even quite intrusive. In which case, staggering it forward so we can see that there's an extra addition, there's a little lip here. Now in that variation, this is where we will need the brick. As you can see, the end, if our head is to rest here at the end, we're going to fall all the way off the top of it and create a good degree of stretch in the neck. And that really draws us away from the practice. So the addition of the brick here is to come in between the two bolsters. As it comes in between the two bolsters, you can see that now there's a greater degree of cushioning here, similar to a pillow. Then finally, the second blanket, I'm going to fold a third at a time and I'm going to get into this pillow shape. So it's still a rectangular fold. For my blanket, that's actually 4 folds now to take it to here. And again, we have that extra height and degree of support, this time for the head and the neck and the shoulders. Entry into it is very similar. Hands either side of the bolster. Slowly walk down, really progressively and slowly lowering the body towards the props. Turn the head to one side. As the head rests, we can relax the shoulders and then turn the hands skywards. Our third variation is going to include a third blanket. Here you can see that I've folded the blanket into a rectangular shape again. This rectangular fold needs to be the same width as the edges of both knees because we're going to roll it, and then this roll for many people helps create a greater degree of height and support for the hips. Once we have it rolled and softened down, we can take it behind us and we can either rest it right underneath the knees to add greater height and support, or some might find it more comforting to bring it down to the ankles. And again, it's very similar with this extra degree of support. Here we walk forwards and begin to rest us down. A third variation is going to use the bolsters in a different way. We'll take our brick to one side for now. Let's take the blanket back. As we walk towards the back of our mat, again, we fold or unfold so the blanket spans the entire width of the mat. We smooth out the creases, making sure the seams are away from where we are going to be placing our body. As we come forwards, this is where we can use the bolster to create more height to the hips, the back of the legs. Bring the bolster in between the feet and you can see straight away that as I've elevated the hips, that extra height means that one, the weight that's falling down onto the ankles and the knees is much less. Secondly, the angle by which we have flexion here and our extension here is much less, meaning it's a bit softer on the joints. Again, more supportive on the joints. And then everything else remains the same. So our bolster can come in. We can use our brick to create a greater degree of support for the bolster, remembering that this top part is where the head is going to be fully supported and the cheek. Now this time I'm going to use an addition for the blanket. I'm going to fold it once more and bring in a pillow. I'm going to fold it once more and bring in a pillow. And then this final blanket I'm going to take around my shoulders for an extra degree of warmth. As I walk forwards, turn the chin, rest the head. Now I particularly like this variation of the posture, more so because of the sensation that I get from the blanket resting on top of my body. Now this isn't a weighted blanket, but if you have a weighted blanket, it amplifies the sensation that you feel. As well as adding warmth, the blanket on top of your shoulders gives you this very real sense of being held. So you feel, as well as the support from below, that you are kind of being cradled into position just by a very simple, like I say, unweighted blanket. The fourth variation is using the blankets in a different way. Here, instead of using them as a weight or a pillow, we can fold up the blankets a further time, creating our longer rectangular shape. This means it's much thicker, longer, and has that greater degree of cushioning. I'm going to use it as a support for the elbow, the forearm, and the back of the hands. Now for me, there are a few things that I personally pick up on in practice. One, my knees. I always like a lot of cushioning for my knees. Secondly, my elbows, particularly the inside of the elbow. I often feel an incredible degree of softness and support down the central column of the body while I'm on my mat. But anything that ventures off the mat, I become super aware of that harshness of the floor. And more so because there's such a degree of comfort while I'm on the mat. So here, it kind of takes care of that more. As we walk forwards, it would be resting your elbow, your forearms down onto the blankets and the headrest. Also means, particularly if you're on a smoother floor like myself, I can make adjustments to come a little wider, which I need to help open up my shoulders and my chest. If you're practicing on a carpet floor, be aware that you can't have that slide or glide as part of the practice. The final variation is to combine many of the ideas that we've touched on so far. So for this, you do have to have a great number of props, and I know I'm super fortunate to have access to this degree of props, but it's not common. So here I have blanket underneath the knees and the feet. My hips are supported by a bolster which can be substituted for a brick at the back. I'm going to have my arms, forearms and hands fully supported. I've used a combination of the two bolsters and a brick so the head has extra support. And I'm going to choose not to use the blanket as a pillow. Instead, I'm going to come to, again, one of the things that I find much more comforting for myself, and that's to rest over the shoulders. So as we walk forwards, gently turn the head. Let's practice together. Hopefully you've had opportunity to explore different variations and a different setup. Now let's choose one of them and let's practice for 5 minutes in silence together. Now if this is the first practice that you have come to in silence, accept and expect your mind to become busy. You're going to think things, and that's absolutely fine. That's the mind's role. The mind is there to think. We're not trying to imprison the mind, we're not trying to block thoughts or emotions in any way. We're trying to come to a point where we can feel so physically supported that our mind feels the extra support. And so it doesn't need to be so overwhelmed by the thoughts or emotions that flow through it. We can simply just be with them. There'll be some slight instruction when I will guide you to become aware of the breath. But outside of that, it's really to give you opportunity to feel the degree of physical support from the practice, and also to give you an opportunity of silence, 5 minutes to be with yourself. So, choosing your variation, we'll pause for a moment, gently lower the gaze, seal the lips, bring your awareness to the breath. And just simply notice the rhythm of the breath. It's very soft and gentle. And now I invite you to make your way into the posture, slowly lowering the body down towards the supports. And then taking the next few moments just to find any adjustments that you feel are necessary. Noticing the softness of the support and the firmness of the floor. Bringing your awareness to the breath, take an inhale. And then as you exhale, completely relax. Feel the head get heavier, the shoulders soften, and your body drop towards that state of release. Bring your awareness to the breath. And here, without the need to control the breath at all, just allow your awareness to rest on this very calming rhythm of the inhale and the exhale. See if you can tune into the sensations as you inhale. Notice where you feel the stretch. And then also with the exhale, as you breathe out, you may find that there's a greater sense of ease and release. Bring your awareness to the body. And as you do so, see if there are any areas where you could offer a greater sense of ease. Could you maybe relax the muscles of the face or your shoulders? Maybe allow your arms to become heavier. As we close, I'd like to invite you to bring your awareness back to the breath. This time, as you deepen the inhale, notice that it brings with it a greater sense of wakefulness. Once you're ready, you can turn your palms to face downwards onto the mat and firmly press into the hands. As you begin to feel the strength of your arms and shoulders, walk your body up off the props. Make some gentle movements with the head, the shoulders, the elbows and the wrists. And then begin to create a little bit of movement into the knees and the ankles too. Blink your eyes open to find something familiar within the room, and we'll say our goodbyes. Thank you for practicing. I'll see you again soon.